Welcome to Sleepy Tales, where relaxing stories are told slowly and softly to help you gently fall asleep. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. For more peaceful tales, subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated. Now, get comfortable and drift off to tonight's bedtime story. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire, has inspired awe and devotion from gods and mortals alike. Born from the foam of the sea, or, in some stories, as the daughter of Zeus and Dione, she embodies a force that shapes hearts and destinies. Her presence can turn hatred to longing, fear to fascination, and solitude to the warmth of affection. In the stories that follow, we will walk beside her, not in her words or actions, but in the echoes of her influence, the quiet power of beauty and love that touches all who glimpse it, weaving through the lives of gods, heroes, and mortals. In the earliest days, when the world was still shaping itself from chaos, the sea and sky met in quiet harmony. Waves rolled lazily across the nascent oceans, catching the first fragile light of a sun that had only recently begun to shine steadily. From the foamy white crest of the waves, a figure emerged, delicate yet radiant, a presence so powerful that even the ocean seemed to pause in recognition. This was Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire, born not from the usual patterns of life, but from the very essence of the natural world, or in another telling, the daughter of Zeus and Dione, graced with a beauty that even the gods could scarcely comprehend. Whether born from sea foam or divine union, her arrival carried the weight of something profound and transformative. The sea around her shimmered with a light that seemed borrowed from the sky. Seagulls circled high above, their cries faint against the sound of the water, and the wind carried a whisper of promise. Each droplet that fell from her emergence seemed to touch the earth with warmth, and the foam that clung to her form glowed softly, as though the waves themselves sought to honour her. In her presence, even the rocks and shells on the shore seemed to lean toward her, as if drawn by a force older than human understanding. The air carried a subtle sweetness, a sense of anticipation, and an invisible energy that moved creatures and elements alike. The first light of day, bending across the horizon, struck her skin with gentle gold, illuminating every curve, every line of perfection that defined her form. Though the gods already walked the heavens with majesty, this light seemed to recognize something new, a power that would ripple across both Olympus and the mortal world. Beauty, as tangible and potent as any weapon, walked the earth now, and with it came the promise of desire, attraction, and the subtle threads that bind hearts together. The birth of Aphrodite was not silent. The world responded quietly at first, with ripples and breezes and a hum in the air that suggested the coming of change. Far above, the gods of Olympus observed her emergence with varying degrees of curiosity and unease. Zeus, as ever, measured the power of what he saw, understanding in a way few could that love and desire could shape worlds as surely as strength or wisdom. Hera, his sister and consort, recognized immediately the challenge in such a force, the force of longing and beauty that could disrupt harmony and ignite rivalry. Even Poseidon, lord of the seas, felt a subtle shift in his domain, as the waves that had carried her now seemed infused with a new vitality, playful and dangerous all at once. The gods who watched did not speak, for words seemed insufficient, but each felt the stirrings of something extraordinary. Aphrodite's presence, though newborn, already moved the currents of power. Her role was clear, even in these first moments. She was not merely a figure of charm, but the embodiment of love in all its forms. The sudden spark between strangers, the deep devotion that binds families, the admiration that elevates artists and poets, the longing that drives heroes to acts both noble and tragic. Desire, as she carried it, was not simple. It could bring joy or sorrow, fulfillment or ruin, and the awareness of this potential made her arrival all the more significant. Even the mortals, far below Olympus and unaware of the precise moment of her birth, would soon feel the subtle touch of her influence, as hearts stirred at her passing, and lives shifted in the quiet moments of longing or inspiration. The sea, having given her birth, seemed to embrace her fully. Foam clung to her as though it were a garment, and the wind, weaving through her hair, appeared to paint her presence across the horizon. Light and shadow played together on the water, reflecting the duality inherent in her nature. Beauty that could bring both peace and chaos. Love that could soothe or inflame. Mountains and forests at the edges of the world seemed to acknowledge her too, the trees turning slightly toward the coast, the rocks catching glints of her radiance, and even the creatures of land and air responding with a subtle alertness. Every element seemed to understand that this was no ordinary emergence. A power had arrived that would alter hearts and events across time. The reactions of the gods were layered and quiet, as if they too were only beginning to comprehend the reach of her influence. Athena, goddess of wisdom, noted that Aphrodite's force was different from strength or intellect. It was unpredictable, subtle, yet undeniable. Ares, the god of war, felt an immediate stir of interest, not in friendship, but in the recognition of a force that could rival his own. Desire, when wielded carefully, was as potent as any sword. Even Hermes, who travelled swiftly between worlds, felt a sense of intrigue, knowing that the threads of love and attraction could bind or unravel fates as surely as any decree of Olympus. Each god perceived, in their own way, the long shadow her presence would cast. Though she had just emerged, Aphrodite already held sway over aspects of existence that extended beyond the immediate. The water that carried her birth now seemed to pulse with new life, inspiring growth in plants along the shore, igniting a subtle longing in those who walked near it. Birds circled closer, their songs becoming more lyrical, and even the sun seemed to linger longer on her form, drawn to the power that radiated effortlessly from her. The world, in its own way, began to mirror her beauty, as though acknowledging that a new principle had entered its order. Desire, connection, and the shaping of lives through attraction and admiration. Her presence would touch mortals in ways that could never be fully predicted. Heroes would be driven to acts of bravery and folly alike by the influence she carried. Lovers would meet under circumstances orchestrated by invisible currents, their hearts guided by a force beyond their understanding. The arts would flourish, as poets and painters sought to capture not just her image, but the essence of the longing she inspired. Even ordinary lives, quiet and unremarkable, would feel her subtle hand in a glance, a thought, or a sudden stirring of the heart. And so, from the foam of the sea or the lineage of the gods, Aphrodite entered the world. She was more than beauty, more than desire, more than a fleeting spark. She was a force that would shape relationships, choices, and destinies, both divine and mortal. The first light of the world fell upon her, as if acknowledging her significance, and the heavens themselves seemed to wait, sensing that the stories yet to unfold would be irrevocably touched by her presence. In this moment, she was still new, still forming her path, but the influence she carried was already unmistakable. The world had shifted, quietly but profoundly, and the lives she would touch, the passion she would ignite, were only beginning to stir in response. Aphrodite, newly arrived upon the world, soon became more than a figure of beauty to behold. Even as she moved through the skies and shores, invisible threads extended from her presence, touching the lives of gods in ways both subtle and profound. It was not that she spoke or acted directly, at least not yet, but that her very being carried a force capable of shaping thoughts, desires, and decisions. Olympus itself felt the change. Where once the gods had operated primarily through power, wisdom, and strategy, a new element had entered their realm: the force of desire, the stirrings of attraction, the gentle and sometimes dangerous currents of admiration. Zeus, the king of the gods, could not escape the quiet pull of her presence. He did not need to speak to her, nor did he need to command her attention. Yet, in her light, he felt the subtle reminder that strength alone did not govern the hearts of gods or mortals. Even he, accustomed to authority and command, experienced a rare vulnerability in the face of her beauty and influence. The very concept of longing, so foreign to the rigidity of law and rule, entered his awareness, whispering that desire could shape choices and sway alliances in ways brute power could not. He observed her not with envy, but with recognition, that Aphrodite, in her existence alone, held a sway over Olympus that would ripple outward for generations. Ares, the god of war, was perhaps more immediately attuned to her effect. Passion and conflict were his familiar realms, yet Aphrodite's presence introduced an entirely different kind of fervour. Desire, he realized, could inflame hearts as surely as battle could. Rivalries among gods could ignite over her influence, jealousy stirred by who received attention, and alliances could be shifted by the quiet tug of longing. The strength of her charm, her grace, and the radiance she carried was enough to move the powerful and alter even the boldest decisions. Ares, accustomed to wielding fire and blood, learned that Aphrodite's power did not rely on force. It relied on attraction, on the unspoken pull of the heart, on the spark of admiration that could neither be commanded nor resisted entirely. Hermes, ever the observer and messenger, saw the subtle threads most clearly. He moved quickly between realms, witnessing both mortal and divine worlds, and recognized that Aphrodite's influence was invisible yet undeniable. Desire was not only about love, it was about attention, inspiration, and aspiration. A mortal artist might create a poem that moved entire cities, unaware that Aphrodite's touch had guided the flow of his thoughts. A goddess, seeking influence, might find herself swayed not by power or argument, but by the charm and beauty that Aphrodite cast effortlessly. Hermes understood that these ripples, small as they might seem, carried the weight to alter destinies, to shape stories that would endure across time. Even the other goddesses observed her, often in silence. Athena, in her wisdom, recognized the duality inherent in Aphrodite's power. It could inspire noble love, foster admiration for virtue, and encourage connection. Yet it could also inflame jealousy, ignite rivalries, and destabilize carefully constructed plans. Hera, the queen of the gods, perceived in Aphrodite a force that could challenge authority not by strength, but by desire. Yet neither Athena nor Hera could deny the necessity of her presence. A world without love, without the subtle guidance of longing and attraction, would be incomplete, flat, and unimaginative. Aphrodite introduced nuance into Olympus, a complexity that could not be contained by war, wisdom, or rule alone. In this way, Aphrodite became a quiet architect of events on Olympus. She influenced marriages among gods, rivalries between siblings, and decisions that would touch both divine and mortal realms. Her power was subtle, the kind that moved without being seen. Where disputes arose, she could inflame passions that changed allegiances. Where joy or contentment existed, her presence could deepen admiration or curiosity. Even the smallest shifts in favour, the fleeting glance, the unspoken yearning, carried significance under her influence. She did not command, yet she directed, not with hands or decrees, but through the intangible force of desire itself. This influence extended beyond romantic longing. Gods admired one another, sought inspiration, and felt longing in many forms. Ares could admire the courage of a fellow god. Athena could appreciate beauty beyond her logic, and Hermes could feel a spark of admiration that guided his interactions. Aphrodite's presence allowed these emotions to flow freely, teaching even the immortals that desire and inspiration were forces as real and consequential as any command of power. Admiration, longing, and subtle envy became threads in the web of Olympus, threads that she spun quietly yet irresistibly. The result was a world in which nothing, not even the rigid hierarchy of gods, could ignore the sway of her presence. Conflicts and competition still occurred, but now they were layered with subtle forces that complicated outcomes. Heroes of the mortal world, yet to appear on the stage of history, would one day encounter this influence, and their hearts and choices would reflect it. Even on Olympus, where immortals moved in measured patterns of strategy and decree, the invisible currents of love, desire, and beauty now guided movement in unexpected ways. Aphrodite had not yet acted directly, yet she was already a mover of worlds, a force of attraction that altered events without speech, without confrontation. As she walked across the realms, even the elements responded to her. Light seemed to linger in places where she had passed, and gentle winds carried the faintest scent of her presence. Rivers, mountains, and forests appeared subtly more vibrant in her wake, as though the world itself recognized the significance of her power. Animals, too, reacted, drawn by some instinctive sense of the harmony she represented, the union of beauty, attraction, and life. Her influence was everywhere yet nowhere, shaping the course of actions both divine and mortal, inspiring without command, stirring hearts without demand. In time, mortals would feel her presence more directly, yet for now she remained the quiet force that moved Olympus. She shaped relationships that were unspoken, rivalries that were yet to ignite, an admiration that would one day reach even the most distant corners of the world. Desire, in her hands, became a principle as fundamental as strength, intelligence, or fate itself. Even gods, mighty as they were, recognized that some forces were too subtle to see yet too powerful to ignore. Aphrodite had arrived not only as a goddess of beauty, but as a weaver of longing, a guide of inspiration, and a shaper of hearts and choices that reached beyond Olympus and into the mortal realm. Her influence would continue to expand, touching lives and shaping stories that were yet to unfold. The anticipation of this presence was felt, not as a warning, but as a quiet acknowledgement that the lives of gods and mortals alike would never be the same. Desire, admiration, inspiration, these were no longer simple concepts. They were tools and forces imbued with the power of a goddess who had just begun to walk among them. Even now, in the early days, the subtle shaping of Olympus was underway, laying the foundation for the interactions with mortals that would follow, the loves and conflicts that would define eras, and the enduring stories that would carry her name across generations. Aphrodite's presence extended far beyond the halls of Olympus. Mortals, unaware of the exact moment she touched their lives, still felt the stirrings of longing, attraction, and inspiration that she carried. She moved among them not in person, but through invisible currents that shaped hearts, desires, and decisions. From kings and warriors to farmers and poets, her influence could ignite passion and admiration, inspire bravery, or, at times, sow discord. Love, in its many forms, was her domain, and she wielded it with the same quiet power that had already begun to move the gods. The story of Paris and Helen illustrates the way her influence could alter the course of history. When Paris, Prince of Troy, encountered Helen, Queen of Sparta, it was more than chance that drew them together. Aphrodite had guided the sparks of attraction that would grow into consuming desire. This love, fated to bring both ecstasy and destruction, shaped the fate of cities and empires. Troy would fall, alliances would fracture, and countless lives would change forever, all set in motion by the subtle force of a goddess who understood the depth and danger of human longing. In this way, Aphrodite's gift was dual-edged. It could bring joy, connection, and fulfillment. Yet it could also bring conflict, jealousy, and sorrow, depending on the hearts it touched and the choices that followed. Adonis, too, became an emblem of her power over mortal life. His beauty, so remarkable that it rivaled the gods, drew her attention and favour. Aphrodite's care for him nurtured a love that seemed to promise eternal delight, yet it was shadowed by fragility and impermanence. Through him, she demonstrated that desire could inspire devotion and protection, but also that it carried vulnerability. Life and death, pleasure and grief were intertwined when she touched a mortal's fate. To be blessed by Aphrodite was to experience both the heights of joy and the depths of loss, as though love itself demanded balance between wonder and danger. Anchises, a mortal prince, became another figure through whom her influence shaped events. Aphrodite's attraction to him led to a union that produced Aeneas, a hero whose destiny would echo through generations. Here, her touch extended beyond the immediate, guiding the lineage of mortals and shaping the destiny of nations. Love, in her hands, was never a trivial or fleeting matter. It was a force that could create heroes, alter the paths of families, and inspire deeds that would be remembered in stories for centuries. Even in the quietest moments, her presence guided mortals, weaving desire and admiration into the fabric of life itself. Her gift, while powerful, was never simple. Love could elevate a heart, inspire courage, and deepen bonds between people, yet it could also consume, distract, and destroy. A soldier might leave his home, drawn by the call of a beloved, only to face peril in foreign lands. A ruler might make a choice motivated by desire rather than reason, altering the fate of a city or army. A poet could find inspiration that produced beauty for the ages, yet suffer heartbreak or jealousy in its creation. All of these outcomes flowed from the same invisible touch, guided by Aphrodite, whose understanding of desire encompassed both its delights and its danger. In villages and cities, farmers and artisans felt her presence in smaller, quieter ways. A glance exchanged at a market, a sudden attraction between neighbours, or a surge of admiration for a young poet, all were shaped by her influence. Even those who didn't recognise her hand in their hearts lived lives subtly guided by the forces she embodied. Love, longing, and beauty were present in every human connection, from fleeting infatuation to deep, lasting devotion. Through these currents, she demonstrated that desire could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, that the heartbeat of mortals carried echoes of divine influence. Yet she did not act with cruelty or caprice without purpose. Even the sorrow that her touch sometimes brought was part of a larger pattern: to teach, to awaken, and to expand the possibilities of life. Mortals, unaccustomed to the awareness of gods, often mistook love's power for chance or fate, unaware that it was guided by Aphrodite's hand. The duality of her gift, pleasure and peril, joy and suffering, shaped human experience, making hearts capable of greater depth and actions capable of lasting significance. Love became a teacher as much as a delight. Its lessons carried in every choice and every longing. Heroes, in particular, were shaped by her influence. The courage of warriors often intertwined with love or desire, whether for family, country, or a chosen partner. Aphrodite's presence inspired strength, resilience, and even recklessness. Achievements, victories, and failures alike were coloured by the passion she nurtured. Mortals responded to her as they did to the sun or the sea, unable to command its movements, yet forever shaped by its presence. Desire in her hands became a force as fundamental to life as food, water, or breath, silently directing choices and actions across generations. Through these mortal interactions, Aphrodite's power became tangible and far-reaching. Cities and kingdoms, poets and warriors, farmers and rulers, all felt the subtle guidance of her influence. Love could unite or divide, inspire heroism or folly, elevate or humble, and in all cases it moved with the quiet inevitability of a goddess's touch. Mortals, though they rarely saw her face, carried her presence in their hearts, guided by the invisible hand of a deity who understood the profound complexity of longing. Yet even as she shaped mortal hearts, her own experiences with love were not yet fully explored. While she inspired passion in others, her own relationships, both among the gods and with select mortals, would unfold in ways that revealed her desires, her choices, and the intricate balance of her power. The threads of attraction and devotion that she guided externally were mirrored internally as she navigated the intersections of desire, companionship, and divine responsibility. Her influence on mortals would soon be joined by the story of her own loves, revealing how the goddess of desire herself experienced the forces she set in motion. As her presence extended from Olympus to the world below, the stage was set for her personal relationships to intersect with her power over others. Mortals continued to act and react under her influence, while the gods watched, aware that her own choices would shape alliances, rivalries, and desires among them. The pattern of admiration, longing, and attraction was already complex. Yet the goddess herself would add another layer, demonstrating that even a deity could be touched, moved, and challenged by the very forces she controlled. The duality of her gift, its capacity to inspire both joy and conflict, prepared the way for the next chapter of her story. Mortals and heroes had begun to experience the reach of her power, yet the full measure of Aphrodite's influence, both outward and inward, was only beginning to reveal itself. Love, desire, and beauty flowed through the world, shaping destinies and igniting hearts. But the personal dimension of her life would soon bring these forces into sharper focus. In this, the lives of mortals and gods alike would continue to intertwine with her own, creating a tapestry of passion, longing, and the enduring power of attraction that would carry forward through the ages. While Aphrodite's influence on mortals and gods shaped destinies far and wide, her own experiences with love were no less intricate or significant. She was a goddess who inspired desire in others, yet she herself could feel longing, passion, and even vulnerability. The power she carried did not make her immune to emotion. Instead, it intertwined with her experiences, amplifying the intensity of affection, jealousy, and connection. Her relationships were not simply matters of attraction. They were delicate balances between divine capability and the frailty of feeling, between control and surrender. One of the most enduring connections in her life was with Ares, the god of war. Their bond was as fiery as his domain, filled with the intensity of attraction and the thrill of passion. In his presence, Aphrodite felt a force that matched her own, a reckless energy that could not be contained. It was a love that moved swiftly, like the tide, powerful and undeniable, yet it was also fraught with challenges. Desire between them burned brightly, often sparking rivalries, jealousy, and tension among the other gods. Still, their connection revealed a fundamental truth. Even immortals, when confronted with desire, are shaped by its currents, compelled to act in ways that defy logic, strategy, or power alone. Her union with Hephaestus, the god of craftsmanship, presented a contrasting form of attachment. While he was less fiery and more measured than Ares, the bond held its own complexities. Hephaestus admired her beauty and grace, and his devotion was quiet but unwavering. For Aphrodite, it was a relationship that demanded subtle navigation, balancing her independent spirit and the allure of her desires with the expectations and loyalty of another divine being. Even among gods, love was not simple, and Aphrodite's relationships revealed the delicate interplay of admiration, respect, and personal longing that defined romantic connection. In these and other relationships, Aphrodite experienced the duality of love firsthand. There was exhilaration and joy, the sense of being fully alive in the presence of another, and the tender moments in which companionship offered understanding and comfort. Yet there was also conflict, the shadow of envy or betrayal, the pull of desire that could not always be contained, and the subtle challenges of being both desired and independent. Her heart, though divine, was not untouched by the complexities of attachment, and the emotions she experienced were intensified by the power she wielded and the influence she carried over others. The impact of her personal relationships extended beyond herself. The gods and mortals who witnessed or felt the consequences of her choices were themselves affected. Rivalries on Olympus flared or subsided depending on the subtle shift of her attention, the unspoken inclinations of her heart, or the quiet favour she extended. Heroes and mortals, guided by her influence, sometimes found themselves entwined with events born from her own desires, illustrating the interconnectedness of divine passion and worldly consequence. Love, under her hand, became both a personal experience and a principle that shaped life across realms. Her emotions were layered and complex. Desire could bring warmth and delight, yet it could also bring restlessness, uncertainty, and longing that was never fully satisfied. Even as a goddess, she was aware of the limitations and challenges inherent in attachment. Her beauty and allure made her sought after by many, yet the very attention she inspired could complicate her own feelings, introducing tension between independence and intimacy. These experiences deepened her understanding of love, shaping not only her actions, but also the subtle guidance she offered to others, whether mortal or divine. Aphrodite's role as both participant and force in love created a dynamic in which her personal experiences reflected the broader patterns she influenced. Passion, longing, and admiration were not merely external tools, but lived realities for her. She knew the exhilaration of mutual desire and the quiet ache of longing unfulfilled. She understood the challenges of balancing attraction, loyalty, and personal freedom. Even in moments of seeming pleasure or success, she carried the awareness that love's currents were powerful and unpredictable, capable of shaping fates and stirring hearts in ways that could neither be fully predicted nor controlled. The goddess also experienced moments of reflection and subtle insight. In solitude, she considered the effects of her own choices, the heart she touched, and the consequences of her passions. She saw how even a fleeting glance, a subtle favour, or a quiet act of attention could ripple through lives, influencing decisions, sparking desire, or altering allegiances. Love was never simply a personal matter. It was a force that moved through worlds, shaping destinies and guiding actions. Her awareness of this interplay deepened her own experience of attachment, giving her an understanding that extended beyond individual feeling to the essence of connection itself. Through her intimate connections, Aphrodite also discovered the nuances of trust, compromise, and influence. Desire could draw beings together, yet sustaining affection required attentiveness and subtle negotiation. Even gods accustomed to absolute power needed to navigate the fragile territory of hearts, vulnerabilities, and expectations. Her relationships became lessons in patience, awareness, and the subtle balance of giving and receiving, teaching her that power alone was never enough to sustain love. The interplay of emotion and influence, intimacy and autonomy became central to her experience. illustrating the depth of complexity inherent in the bond she both inspired and experienced. Despite these challenges, Aphrodite's presence remained radiant, her influence undiminished. In her personal experiences, she demonstrated that love was neither weakness nor folly, but a force as potent and transformative as any command of the heavens. She moved among the gods and mortals, inspiring admiration, desire, and devotion, while also navigating the quiet intricacies of her own heart. Her love life, like her influence, was never simple, yet it revealed her humanity within divinity, her vulnerability within power, and her capacity to shape hearts while remaining fully immersed in the intensity of her own experiences. Her relationships hinted at the larger legacy she would carry. The bonds she formed, the passion she nurtured, and the emotions she experienced were not limited to the private sphere of her existence. They touched gods and mortals alike, influencing choices, inspiring courage or folly, and leaving traces in the stories and memories of those she encountered. Through both her own attachments and the desires she inspired in others, Aphrodite's presence became a constant, shaping not only the moments of love and longing, but the broader tapestry of events that defined both divine and mortal realms. As she moved through these experiences, the groundwork was laid for her enduring influence. Mortals would continue to encounter the effects of her guidance, feeling the stirrings of admiration and longing that shaped their lives. Gods would respond to her presence, negotiating rivalry, alliance, and affection in ways informed by her power. Her personal experiences of love, passion, and desire would inform the subtle lessons she imparted, demonstrating the transformative and sometimes dangerous force of connection. Aphrodite's story of intimacy and attachment was only one layer of her power, yet it revealed the essence of her being. A goddess whose presence intertwined desire, beauty, and influence, leaving a mark on all who lived within her orbit. The stage was now set for her ultimate legacy, for the ways in which her presence would continue to shape the world, inspire devotion, and guide the currents of love and beauty for generations. Her personal connections, while intense and transformative, were part of a larger pattern that extended far beyond individual hearts. The choices she made, the desires she experienced, and the passions she nurtured in others would all contribute to a continuing influence that spanned time, space, and the lives of gods and mortals alike. The full measure of Aphrodite's reach, both personal and universal, was poised to reveal itself in the stories yet to unfold. Aphrodite's presence did not fade with the passing of ages. Even as generations of mortals rose and fell, even as cities were built and destroyed, her influence remained a constant, weaving through the lives of gods, heroes, and ordinary people alike. She was not confined to a single time or place. She existed wherever beauty was admired, wherever love was celebrated, and wherever desire stirred in hearts, visible or hidden. Her impact extended from the highest realms of Olympus to the smallest corners of the human world, shaping thought, action, and inspiration in ways both subtle and profound. In rituals and ceremonies, mortals honoured her with offerings and prayers, recognizing her power over the forces of attraction and devotion. temples were built in her name, their altars decorated with images that celebrated the forms and ideals of beauty she represented. In festivals, songs and dances echoed her presence, reminding communities of the central role of love, admiration, and harmony in life. Even when her name was spoken quietly, her essence was acknowledged. The invisible currents of desire, longing, and connection that bound families, friends, and lovers together were understood to flow from her influence. Through these practices, mortals not only expressed devotion, but also allowed themselves to be guided by her hand, drawing inspiration, courage, and insight from her presence. Artists, poets, and storytellers found in Aphrodite an endless source of inspiration. Painters captured her form, sculptors sought to reproduce the grace she embodied, and poets attempted to convey the intensity of desire and love she inspired. Her presence transformed the way mortals perceived the world, highlighting the beauty in nature, in human emotion, and in creation itself. Even when her image was interpreted differently across cultures and eras, the underlying principle remained. Aphrodite was the embodiment of attraction, inspiration, and the power that love holds in shaping thought and action. Through creativity, her influence persisted, allowing mortals to reach beyond the ordinary and glimpse the extraordinary, connecting human imagination with divine essence. Her dual nature ensured that admiration and longing were never simple or predictable. Aphrodite nurtured connection, compassion, and devotion, yet she also held the potential to ignite conflict, jealousy, and rivalry. Love under her influence could inspire acts of courage, generosity, and fidelity, yet it could also drive hearts to obsession, betrayal, and folly. These contrasts were not flaws, but reflections of the profound complexity of desire itself. Her power was a reminder that the forces that shape attraction and affection are never fully contained, and that even beauty and longing, when fully realized, carry the capacity to transform the world in ways that can be both constructive and disruptive. Throughout history, her touch could be seen in the alliances forged by desire, the rivalries inflamed by jealousy, and the devotion inspired by admiration. Heroes acted with courage or recklessness, guided in part by the currents of love she stirred. Families were bound together, sometimes with joy and sometimes with tension, by forces that mirrored her presence. Even in moments of solitude, mortals could feel the echoes of her influence, the sudden surge of attraction, the longing for connection, the inspiration to create or to act. Aphrodite's reach was invisible, yet unmistakable, shaping not only individual lives, but also the broader patterns of human behavior and society. Among the gods, her legacy continued to grow as well. Her presence reminded immortals that even beings of immense power and wisdom were not immune to the forces of love and desire. Conflicts were tempered or complicated, alliances strengthened or shifted, and admiration and attraction wove subtle networks of influence across Olympus. The choices of gods, though often guided by power and intellect, were also touched by the same currents that she had first introduced among mortals. Aphrodite's dual nature, capable of nurturing devotion while stirring passion and rivalry, ensured that the lives of the divine were never simple or static. Desire, in its many forms, remained a driving force even among immortals. a force that she embodied and directed with quiet mastery. Her influence was not static or confined, it evolved alongside humanity. As societies developed, new forms of art, literature, and social structures were infused with the principles she represented. The admiration of beauty, the celebration of love, and the acknowledgement of desire became universal themes, repeated across cultures and epochs. Even when her name was lost or transformed, the essence of Aphrodite persisted. She was the force that made people notice one another, that encouraged connection and passion, that inspired devotion and creativity. The world, shaped in part by her presence, became richer, more intricate, and more alive. Aphrodite's legacy also carried lessons about the balance of power and vulnerability, both for gods and mortals. Love, when guided by her, was a force that demanded awareness and respect. It could elevate hearts, but it could also consume them. Desire was not inherently gentle, and attraction could be both a gift and a challenge. Yet even in its most tumultuous manifestations, her influence demonstrated the profound capacity of love and beauty to shape actions, inspire courage, and create bonds that endure across time. Her presence reminded the world that desire, in its many forms, was a force as real and consequential as any rule of law, strategy of war, or decree of kings. Even in the quietest moments, Aphrodite's touch could be felt. A poet writing by candlelight, a lover longing across the distance, a child captivated by the first bloom of spring. Each of these experiences carried the echo of her influence. Desire, admiration, and inspiration were no longer abstract concepts, but living, tangible forces, guiding thoughts and actions with the same inevitability as wind shaping the trees or water carving the cliffs. Her presence remained pervasive, flowing through generations, invisible yet undeniable, and always shaping the way hearts moved and connected. The enduring nature of her influence also served as a reminder of the interconnectedness of life. Gods, mortals, heroes, and ordinary people all responded to the current she set in motion. Acts of devotion, expressions of beauty, moments of longing or inspiration, they were all touched by her, whether directly or indirectly. The patterns of human life, the unfolding of events, and the weaving of stories were shaped by a force that was constant, evolving, and infinitely nuanced. Aphrodite's power did not diminish with time. It transformed, adapting to new circumstances while remaining rooted in the principles of love, beauty, and desire that had defined her from the beginning. In the end, her legacy was not a closed story, but an ongoing presence. Wherever beauty was celebrated, wherever desire stirred, wherever love inspired action or reflection, Aphrodite existed. She remained both a gentle guide and a powerful force, capable of nurturing devotion and igniting passion, of inspiring creativity and stirring competition. Her influence continued to flow through mortal and divine worlds alike, shaping choices, inspiring courage, and revealing the transformative power of connection. Even as centuries passed, her story was not finished. In temples and hearts, in works of art and the quiet moments of longing, Aphrodite remained. Her presence could be felt in the warmth of attraction, the spark of inspiration, and the enduring pursuit of connection. The goddess of love, beauty, and desire continued to walk unseen among the world she had shaped, reminding all who felt her influence that the forces of affection, admiration, and longing are eternal, subtle, and capable of transforming every life they touch. Her story, like desire itself, is never complete. It flows endlessly, shaping the world in ways both gentle and profound, leaving traces in hearts and lives that will continue for generations beyond the myths.